So, hello back to everyone. Now we proceed with our discussion panel on the status of 5G. We have today with us Dr. Alexandros Kaloxylos, Executive Director of the 5G Infrastructure Association, 5G EIA. We have Cristian Pațachia, Development and Innovation Manager from Orange, Romania, and Sven van der Meer, Lead Architect of Distributed Systems at VMware in Ireland. Thank you for accepting our invitation to join us in this panel. I will now give you the floor for initial brief presentation from each of you on your current view of the status of 5G, and then we will have a nice panel discussion, questions for you. Of course, our audience will have also some questions for you, and we can ask also questions between the panelists. So, Dr. Alexandros, please go ahead.
Hello. I hope that you can see me and hopefully the slides that will appear now.
Yes. Now.
Okay, then we can start. Okay, so first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to your webinar. And following up, of course, everybody will call when a presentation will start. Okay, so following up from the previous presentations, which I think were quite nice and interesting. The first statement that I would like to make is that I think that we are dealing with one of the most important topics for the massive uptake of 5G. So the development of the net apps that are going to be used by the verticals. What I would like to briefly present is the current understanding, at least for myself, on where we are and what we can achieve and what is still missing. So roughly a year ago, we had a white paper developed from a number of 5G PPP projects, where it was clear that a lot of work is being done in the 5G PPP in several vertical categories. So from Industry 4.0, automotive, agriculture, smart cities, at least 10 different vertical cases. And here you see a number of projects from the infrastructure projects and dedicated vertical projects. So indeed, the 5G appears to be delivering on what is promised. I mean, to allow the digitization of the verticals and allow the development of new services and applications. Analyzing the contributions from the projects, and we had quite a few, we tried to build a table to check what were exactly the functionalities that have been used by these vertical cases in the different categories. So here you see the categories, and here you see the functionalities, the 5G functionalities, especially that legacy systems like 4G systems cannot support. And obviously, this is not a map of what is really needed from 5G. I think that the imagination of the developers is the ceiling. However, there are two functionalities that stand out. The evolution of the 5G NR, because it gives us very high throughput, low latency, very high reliability. And I think this one here, the network slicing, which allows the flexible support of different network services over the same physical infrastructure. So all of the projects were dealing with this. And of course, we had a number of other capabilities from 5G, like the mobile edge computing, the smart network management for the fast deployment of the services and the retraction, location service and context awareness, so taking into consideration additional information from the services to improve the performance of the network and the performance of the services themselves. The softwareization, which is totally linked with the flexibility of the network, and of course the guaranteed QoS, because it appears to be very important for a number of services. So I would like to just say a few things. Indeed, one of the key findings was that 5G is not about the faster and more reliable networks. 5G NR indeed allow us to enter into the development of services that previously could not be supported. For example, if you need in the automotive sector to have delays in the order of the 10 milliseconds, this was not possible, for example, with LTE. Now it is possible, But I think the key characteristic of 5G is the flexibility in service provision and in the deployment of the services and the management of the services. So I've seen several examples where, for example, in vertical categories like health, maybe for several of the applications, the delay is not that critical, but the service deployment is quite important. And of course, in several examples, it was identified that one is able to support at the same time services that have totally different characteristics. So imagine that you have one service that combines the network support for EMBB and ultra reliable and critical services. This again was not possible previously with the monolithic systems. So we are in a situation where the developers are indeed able to develop new innovative services, and we can build a new ecosystem. However, there is indeed, however, we have from the one hand verticals that are, in my personal opinion, more, let's call them mature than other categories. For example, in the automotive, there is a lot of work to understand what is needed from the network infrastructure. Several international organizations are working, not only standardization organizations, but also organizations like the 5GAA are working to understand in depth what is needed from the automotive sector and how this is translated into the requirements from the network. This is not the case for all the verticals. I just picked up an example that I know quite well, but this is not the case for all the verticals. We have in the 5G PPP some activities, for example, to map the service requirements to the network requirements. So what actually the application really needs from the network and what the network can offer. So I think, just to put it on the table for the discussion, if I had to answer the question, what is still needed, I think the communication link and the better understanding between the service providers and the network operators is something that quite possibly needs extra effort in several of the verticals. So, for example, there was a lot of work in a white paper for the mapping that I mentioned before, from service requirements to network requirements. And it was clear during the process that extra work is needed there between the two different walls, the verticals and the community of the network vendors, operators, etc. So it seems that there is a big need for service integrators that will be something like, the intermediate layer between the actual need of the business of a vertical and the network operators. And I think in order for the vertical service providers to understand what exactly is needed from a business perspective and how this can be translated for the deployment of the service, the operation of the service over the network, and the monitoring of the actual performance of the service. So I think that projects like 5G ASP and the other projects in ICT 41 are dealing with a very hot topic. So exactly how this can be merged and how the new ecosystem of SMEs and any category of stakeholders that are going to be involved in the development of services, what is the work that they have to do. So that was an opening statement from my side.
Thank you, Alexandros. This is good because now we can give the voice to Cristian Pațachia from a network operator from Orange, Romania.
Thank you, Diogo. Hello, everybody. I'm glad to present the feedback from the operators side. I will also try to share a first slide from my side, just to confirm when you will see it.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'll be quick with the introduction on the status of the 5G, but I will refer strictly on the Romanian side and particularly on Orange Romania, as we are the main operators with quite an extensive experience, I would say, already in the 5G area, considering that the commercial 5G network in Romania from Orange started in end of 2019, so October 2019, when we opened the network. Since then, we expanded in several cities. Today, we are on around 19 cities. So here, the information in this slide is already it's already old. We are moving very fast with the coverage. In Bucharest, we have 100% coverage, and this is good, especially for the MBB type of services that we are offering, not only to the consumer market, but also to the companies. And here maybe a focus for us is on the SME part with this 5G fixed wireless access type of services, where practically you can replace the fiber or maybe to backup connection that you have in your premise. And on the what is interesting and also nice statistics is currently one out of 3 customers is buying on a 5G device. This statistics was 1 out of 4 in the first part of this year. And another important information that we have from our internal studies is that 72% of the companies are expecting that their operator to provide 5G support, and maybe this is maybe linked to what Alexandros mentioned about the need for a service integrator, and maybe for more opening in explaining the capabilities and the benefits of a 5G architecture, especially for the developers of different applications which can benefit better from this network. We still have a lot of work to do in this respect, but practically what is here is confirming what Alexandros mentioned. In our case, this part with the openness toward more explanation and bringing more information is actually using also another enabler that we have in our 5G ecosystem developed in Romania by Orange. It's called 5G Lab. It's an occasion and collaboration that we have in Bucharest, and it's part of Orange Group strategy to have a test bed of research and innovation on 5G. But it's not the only one, let's say, activities on our side to open our capability and our network for the developers of the application of the network applications. But in the same time, participating in projects, in the research projects like the 5GSP and in others from the Horizon 2020, especially on the 5GPP side, it's another way of bringing, being close to the community, trying to educate the community, and especially thinking about our audience, which is probably a lot of coming from the academic side, at least from Romania, and not in the final to bring close to us the technology startups, the one that actually will benefit from the development and on the research done on the 5G. And sometimes, the spin-off from the academic research, it can be an efficient way to start a business close to an operator or to a technology provider, and then to be scale internationally in other affiliates. This is actually the promise of our accelerator program, and here I'm referring to the Orange Fab program. In terms of the coverage in Romania, I said that we are now in the 19 cities already, and we are expanding, starting from the main cities that you can see on the map. Of course, Bucharest 100% cover, but also thinking about Constanța, which is close to the Black Sea, with port type of applications that can develop there. And looking to the verticals that also Alexandros mentioned, here you have the focus, at least from Orange Romania, and here for sure that we are funding automotive, which is one of the important enabler for our infrastructure. And here we have active collaboration with the biggest player from the automotive industry, and I refer only to 2 of them, Continental Automotive and Bosch, with which we are developing different proof of concept in this moment in Iași, in the northeast part of Romania with Continental, and in Timișoara with Continental, but also in Cluj-Napoca with Bosch. While on the health, we started some proof of concept with one of the startups that we are collaborating with on Telios Care. on the telemedicine, and we are also hoping to see more and more NetApp developers coming also on the smart cities and industry 4.0, because these are again a lot of opportunities, and we are open to support them. And as mentioned before, we are very open with this enabler called 5G Lab, and here you have just a snapshot from our collaboration with the Polytechnic University from Bucharest. We do hope to extend this collaboration and this type of, let's say, research-oriented, but also very, very pragmatically business-focused type of activities in other university centers in Romania. This 5G Lab concept, like I said, it's an program which is the international level, so it's a program of the Orange Group. It's available in other countries like France, like Belgium also, and maybe a particularity for Romania is that we are very, very, very close to the academic side, and we do hope to find and to bring closer to us also the NetApp developers, and to open the network for them, and maybe a call to action for us. And probably here maybe Roman will bring more information in the last presentation, is to get involved, to be involved in this community that we are building thanks to 5G ASP.
Thank you, Cristian. Now I'll give the voice to Sven from VMware.
Okay, if I find my mute button, you might even hear me. Sorry for that. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Thank you for having me on this webinar, which I think is very interesting. I joined an hour ago and I learned a lot. Very interesting stuff. So status of 5G, that's a big question. We can talk about this probably for years. But my take on this is that when you look at it, then 5G is a multi-dimensional ecosystem of many first things that we see the first time in a radio network. And we're highlighting here a view of them. So we have massive broadband, and you have eMBB, and you have URLLC, and you have the advances on the radio side that most people associate with 5G. But you also have things like cloud native. That's the first time that we have actually cloud technology in the radio network and in the core network. We haven't seen that before. We have pervasive connectivity, so we're going into M-to-M, machine-to-machine communication. We have Internet of Things. We have lots of devices and sensors being accessible via 5G. We're moving into an open and programmable world. You have seen before on the NetApp and on the architecture side from 5GASP that you have, where you have Open WAN, or O1 as one of the people who standardize it. You have MAC. You have the core network being a service-oriented architecture now, service-based architecture now. So effectively, the whole 5G network is open and very much programmable. This is something we have never seen before. And on the 5G core side, the 5G SPA, that's the first time probably that 3GPP has a service-based view on a full backend system, which is a massive improvement and which is a massive change and hopefully a massive improvement. It's definitely a change. If it's an improvement, we will see later. And then come back autonomic networks. That's a topic that I had worked on 15 years ago, probably. And autonomic or autonomous networks and intent-based networking in that combination, or automated optimization, always seems to come back when we get too complicated in the things we're looking at, i.e. operation and management. So they become very complicated. Complexity is not so much a problem because we're engineers. We're used to deal with complexity, but when they become complicated, that's a different quality. So autonomic networks come back that we have the capacity to actually have the network exposing some self capabilities, being self-optimized, self-healing, self-managed, at least in parts or in particular domains or particular deployments to limit the load on network management. There's a lot of things coming into this, like federation, autonomy, distribution of information and stuff. And then what we've seen right now coming out is time-sensitive communication as sort of an extension of broadband and low latency towards the application. Right? So time-sensitive can mean extremely low latency for car-to-car communication or massive broadband because applications have video streaming, live parallel video streaming. But time sensitive can also mean that an application actually is sensitive to some time budget. If I go to my doctor and they have to download my patient file is 15 gigabyte, it has to be downloaded within the time I have with my doctor, half an hour visit. So it's a time sensitivity here of 2 or 3 minutes for 15 gigabyte download. That's the time budget. You know, if the time budget is overrun, then my whole appointment with my doctor goes down. So that's what time sensitive communication means. It doesn't mean ultra fast and ultra low. It means for the application, each application individually. And that brings us to some things where we actually need to look at what do we have to do to complete 5G. So what's open? When we look at this multi-dimensional ecosystem, there's also a multi-dimensional variance problem that we have to look at. So one is the open and programmable aspect. It's gonna be like when I open everything with Open WAN or Mac or with my service-based 5G core network, then obviously I have a problem with plug and play. Like how substitutable are different components? What's the interoperability between those components? What's the composability to build towers between these components from different vendors using different technologies? And I think the multi-industry effort is required here. You see it in OMA, you see it in Mac, you probably will see it in the core network as well. Autonomic network, we have monolithic frameworks still in place. So the introduction of services and service-based and cloud native is still in its infancy, which is limiting the ability to actually make network operation management easier. And then on the last side, the time-sensitive communications, we need some SLA-driven fungible edge, so an edge that actually can adapt to the situation relatively easy. So you're probably looking at a cloud to edge continuum with a multi-access part on one side. And that means we actually have to square a few circles. The first one is between programmability and time sensitivity. If everything is programmable, i.e. changeable, CI/CD pipelines can push new software on demand relatively fast. My time sensitivity needs to be calculated on demand as well. Can't be pre-calculated, set up anymore. There is a balance to be found. Another one is real-time cost versus reliability at cost on shared resources. If I have unlimited resources or don't share them, then I can just simply over-provisioning. That's probably not possible with new radio or Mac or the new core network. So we need to find a balance between providing and guarantee, so providing the real-time QoS to as many applications and devices we want, but also to have it reliable within cost for operations and on shared resource. Radio spectrum is a shared resource. We don't have more than what's available on site, just to say. And then there's another thing for 5G. Don't forget the application, of course. 5GASP is one of the projects that looks after the applications, quite interestingly. But there's also another thing that I wanted to highlight, and that's a bit of a plug because we created this Open Grid Alliance, opengridalliance.org. But that's the question, and how does the 5G ecosystem evolve with everything around it? Society moves on, the verticals have their own business, they move on, enterprises moving on, different parts of society moving on. Certain things happen that we can't control that have an impact on us, like a volcano in Spain, or like COVID-19 or other things that come around. Climate change is happening. So how does the 5G ecosystem interact with the rest of life? That's something where we look in the Open Grid Alliance, and I think that's going to be a very interesting part for long-term evolution of everything we do. With that, I hand back to Diogo. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your initial statements. I think that we already got here a good point of discussion surrounding what are the verticals doing in terms of applications and services they provide. And what I would like from you is, so far in the projects that have been developed and in the commercial networks that have been deployed, how many services, new services are being deployed that actually use beyond the new radio and the slicing? I even have more doubts about the slicing, but I think most of our services are being based on the new radio so much that all the other aspects are still shadowed. Do you have a project that is already showcasing some of the uses of the 5G technologies?
I don't know if the question goes to me.
It's open for the panel, but Alexandros, please go ahead.
Again, I can share my experience when I was editing the white paper about the verticals. Indeed, there are two things: how to use the 5G NR, and in the testbed developed in research activities, it's not always easy to reach the limits of 5G and see in the practice that you can support, more than 50,000 devices. It's not feasible. Also, you don't always have the spectrum to check this. So there were projects that managed to have a very good performance, especially with the equipment that was available for the trials. But I think that most of them, it's not only about the slicing, it's also about the deployment of the services and the management of the services. And that's quite impressive. I remember, I'm afraid I don't recall which project it was, but to me, there was an example of a dynamic deployment of a service in case of an emergency in health, when somebody has a stroke. So it was something like Sven was saying. For some cases, you need to deploy something very fast, have specific network characteristics, and be able to download huge amount of information. 5G NR plays a role to some extent, but the flexibility is a totally different thing. And also, there are many projects dealing with the multi-tenancy support. Multiple, services and stakeholders that are using the same physical infrastructure. So I think that this functionality is already in place. And as I was trying to say before, what I think it's missing is for us to explain to the verticals what they can do, and also understand from the verticals what they really want. For example, do they really want 50,000 devices, in a specific geographical area or not? Do they really want, 1 millisecond delay for V2X communication in some services? Or the vehicle, may still operate under a more relaxed constraint. So I think that's quite important to better understand what is needed and what can be provided.
And I think just to connect to this, to what Alexandros just said, I think the whole train is just starting to move right now, because 5G is just about being deployed. Right. I know people might think the statement is debatable, but it's just about there that people actually can start using 5G. Cristian might have a different opinion from Orange, but I, for instance, don't have a 5G phone yet because, right of it doesn't happen. But anyway, enterprise. So everyone who's not a private customer, but a large company that might want to use 5G, is just about starting to understand what this means for them. They're just at the beginning of that journey. And then, so for instance, there's local governments that say we have a large fleet of cars, ambulance or police cars or fire brigade cars, and we want to equip them with, edge compute because they can. It makes policing and ambulancing much easier for them, but then they need to connect this to a network. The network has to run the service in the back end that you can then download in parts to the car for, the front end in the car in case you don't have connectivity. And they have 50,000 cars, right? Police department, ambulances in larger regions, they have that. But we need to bring these people together with then 5G people and cloud people and application developers. You need all these domain experts in one go. And you see projects popping up, like, was it the Port of Southampton in England, that now with Verizon is developing a private 5G network for the port logistics. And those projects will come out, and they might have 50,000 containers on the port, and each of them gets a connectivity badge. So I think those things are just starting, and they will come in larger numbers. The better we are to actually provide people the enterprise with easy to install, easy to manage, and easy to use 5G network application services. If we can't do this, then there's still this gap. We need to bridge that gap.
Okay, now I will give you some information coming from reality. So I said that we have an extensive experience, commercial experience on operating a 5G network since end of 2019. With that statistics of 1 out of 3 devices being 5G capable. This is mainly going to the B2C type of, so consumer type of services, which is MBB, broadband oriented. And here, the network capability, and here I'm referring again to the commercial network, it's based on the non-standalone approach, which is, still sitting in the core services, the underlying services on the 4G. The new radio just to be clear, on the radio part, we have the new radio capability. It's just that in the core, as based on the NSA type of architecture, it's still on the 4G, and this will migrate slowly on the full standalone capability, 5G capability. At least in our case, somewhere in the next year, in the second half of the next year. And here I will come back to the 5G lab approach, which is bringing us to the prototype and the reason that we want to engage more and more in this kind of research projects like 5G, especially because we can be early on the market with a validated proof of concept supporting slicing capability, edge computing, and also validating already an application which in the second part of the next year will be commercially available in the network, and then for sure that can be commercially available in any 5G capable network from Europe. And this is the promise that we have in Orange Romania. This is also the reason that we are inviting to participate close to us in several projects, and here I'm referring particularly to the 5GPP project, to the developer, to the NetApp developer. This is the case for Neobility, which is a partner in the 5G SP, and they are developing on one of the use cases on automotive part, and we do hope together with them and based on the architecture that will be delivered at the end of this project to be able commercially to run such an application, not only in the Orange 5G network in Romania and maybe in France, in Poland, in Spain, or in Slovakia, where the 5G are already commercially, and they will migrate to the full 5G SA capability, but maybe also in other operators network from your country. So this is the promise that at least on Orange side we put on the table.
The floor is open for questions. So if you have a question, you can put it in the chat or ask for audio, and you can use your microphone. But while we wait for contributions, for questions, we have an audience that is mostly of developers. And these developers look for opportunities, and I think that Cristian already explained the viewpoint of Orange about supporting entrepreneurs into developing new use cases. But from the other side, from the perspective of integrators and technology providers such as VMware, what is still to be done to close the gap that we already mentioned here between the verticals and the network operators? What needs to be done in that gap by service providers and integrators, but also technology providers such as VMware?
Simplify things. It's the main problem, I would say, because it's still like we have Kubernetes, okay? So I can have my containers out there and I can use Kubernetes, or I can use VMware Tanzu, or use your preferred Kubernetes product, whatever that might be. And you might even have some control on top of that talks to them. You might have some kind of multi-cloud approach. That's a big thing in our business at the moment, that you can actually deploy your workload in any cloud with the same instrumentation. But it's still relatively complicated, even in that environment, to get this configured right and get this operational day 0, day 1, but then to have a continuous operation with the KPIs that you expect to have, that's day 2. That's not an easy thing, and that's a skill that not many people have. Okay, so then I go to telecoms. I used to work for Ericsson for 9 years, and in the OSS business, and running a network is equally difficult and requires a skill that not many people have either. So now we're trying to bring these two worlds together. You don't find a skill set that has both sides anyway, so you need to actually find a way for these two worlds to talk to each other, find the same terminology, find the same words with good meaning that they understand, and then build things out. And one of the ways to do this is to go to standard bodies or to go to projects like 5GSP or to go to 5GIA. They have a lot of meetings there. The other one is to go out and do it. I think that's what Cristian said. You have you have a 5G lab there in Orange, and you invite people to come and then just go out and do it. And we find customers that have an interest in that, and we go to customers and build those things out, one customer at a time. That's one thing that works too. But I think the simplification is very important, because there's two very complex words, finding each other, and there's words often used like microservice, cloud native, service, network, cross, that have different meanings in different words, often have variant meanings in the same word. So, that already can be very hard. Simplification, I think, is a very important aspect here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have questions from the audience. Question for Dr. Kaloxylos. You said that 5G is about flexibility. What do you mean by that? Could you discuss it in more detail? And what are the impacts of reliability and low latency in 5G, considering the flexibility you mentioned?
Okay, yes. Let's consider 4G systems. 4G systems compared to 5G are rather monolithic in the sense it's quite an advanced system, but simply comparing it with 5G in the following: you have specific network components with specific functionalities. So you have the PGW or the SGW, and you have the MME, and inside the MME you have very specific functions doing exactly the same thing for all the users. Of course, you can differentiate in terms of quality of service when somebody is using different bearers, and that's it. The differentiation goes to the bearers. Now imagine that you want to have 3 different logical networks over the same physical infrastructure that have maybe different functions. For example, in one logical network, which is a slice essentially, you need to have a very advanced security scheme. And in another network, because you want to have a better performance, you want to place some of the functions closer to the edge instead of having it in the core network. So 5G is giving you this flexibility. So fine-tuning the network functions that you want to use in order to achieve and meet the requirements that you have from specific, let's call it service applications. So this flexibility was not there before, definitely not. Now, in terms of the impact on reliability, and also, sorry, just to add that also the deployment of these logical networks from a network management plane, it's much better and much more dynamic in 5G networks. Now, in terms of reliability and low latency, each slice is built, as I was saying before, in a way to meet specific requirements. So as long as you have deployed the slice, then this slice will guarantee that you're going to meet the ultra reliability, the ultra low latency or whatever, because it will have enough resources. Now, in some cases, though, if someone attempts to statistically multiplex slices over the same resources, so one slice could grab potential resources from another slice if these are unused, then for this you need some extra functionality to assure that you are going to guarantee the SLA. So 5G can do many more things that compared to the 4G, which is an excellent system, but 5G, I think it's much better.
I don't know if any of you would like to add something to this question. Then we could move to the next question, which is for Cristian Pațachia. Could you please comment on 5G service assurance? Do you have a service assurance model for the deployed 5G network? And how is it different from the legacy network?
Sure. Thank you for the question. We do have a service assurance for the commercial network, for the 5G commercial network. And like I mentioned today, it's mainly oriented towards the consumer market, so new phones with 5G capabilities, but also oriented towards the small SMEs, the small and medium enterprises, so the businesses side, small locations. Maybe sometimes single locations, which is a replacement for the fixed, line, fiber or copper, or as a backup for them. And here we are trying somehow to match the existing service assurance from the legacy network, especially thinking for the 5G, for the 4G, adding the new capability from the 5G commercial network, especially on the MBB side, so the broadband capability. In terms of the slicing concept and the edge computing concept, for the moment here, these are available and are tested in the 5G lab environments. Why? Because we need to understand better the impact on the quality of service. So the KPIs that George mentioned before in presenting the use cases, we want to validate it before to have a commercial service for the V2X part. I mentioned the collaboration with Bosch and Continental, or for the telemedicine part where you need below 5 milliseconds latency and reliable connectivity. So the URLLC type of services that Alexandros mentioned before. And in order to have that in next year, in the second part of the next year, as a commercial service, jointly with partners like NetApp developers, we need somehow to validate it before and then to define properly the service assurance model. So today, commercially, we are supporting an service assurance based on the B2C mainly oriented services, but also SME, fixed wireless access. And this is pretty much single slice with MBB capability. And we do hope next year to have on this time capability to offer service assurance for the URLLC type of slicing on top of the AMBB. And why not maybe probably in 2 years from now, to be able also to support the massive IoT type of services. We do hope that here the device industry will have a positive sign for for an operator like Orange, because for the moment we are stuck in that part with the devices. It's not only an operator or the architecture provider job, it's also the device producer that they need to implement as soon as possible the standardization, and also to be able to deliver that electronics also in Europe, also in East Europe, also in Romania.
Okay, thank you for your answer. I think that you mentioned a very important point, which is also very much concerned to 5GAS, which are the KPIs. When we started developing 5G, we target very interesting KPIs, very challenging KPIs. We are concluding the 5G PPP project, and how are we now in this point? We are already discussing the KPIs for 6G, or we're starting to discuss those KPIs. Alexandros, would you like to make a statement on KPIs?
Yes, indeed. I mean, roughly 10 years ago, we started setting the target quite high. And I have what I'm saying again is it's my personal opinion now. It's not that I'm representing 5G Infrastructure Association in this one, but I think that we try to push the network to the limits. I mean, I was involved in several discussions where we were also challenging if these KPIs are really needed or not. I mean, there is always a philosophy that if you build the road, the cars will come. So if you really improve the network. Now, in some cases, my preferred example always is the automotive industry, because it's something that I have spent some time on studying this. And I think that indeed, for some cases, the requirements have a lot of rationale on being quite high, but we are not going to do a jump and enter into the fully autonomous driving under any environment, if there is a snow or ice or whatever, in fully autonomous driving, where you need indeed, very few milliseconds that cannot be delivered even with existing 5G systems today. This is not possible even with the 5G systems. But there are plenty. I mean, we have to group and categorize which services need exactly what and which KPIs we need to meet. Although there are several studies that show that there is a significant performance improvement from 4G to 5G. This indeed enables the development of new services. I think that even in the standardization bodies, we will see that there are, I mean, for example, in 3GPP, in some cases, indeed, I think that the target was really and unnecessarily high. But this is the evolution of the network at the end, isn't it? I mean, we target for the best and we push the network to the limit. Now, I think that I'm a fan of the theory that, okay, we can keep on improving the network, I mean, in a sustainable and economically viable way, and the applications will keep on coming. I mean, for 6G, we are discussing for, an immersive system where there is a total link between the reality and the virtual world, and applications that will definitely require much more throughput, fewer, reduced delay and ultra high reliability. But all these come with a cost, and we have to find the appropriate solutions. on how to make it. It's not only to deliver. You have to deliver this in a way that, for example, the operators can really buy, deploy, and make some business out of it.
It's also true that these KPIs also shift the bottlenecks of the end user services from the communication side to the computational part. And all our virtualization stacks now have become part of the bottleneck. Before, we said always that network is the bottleneck. Now we're starting to hit the wall towards virtualization. Can you state about this, Sven?
We're hitting physics, right? I mean, there's a natural thing on physics. There's the speed of light and other things that we can't bend. In software, you can bend anything you want because it's virtual, it's software, but in physics, you can't. So if you have a certain latency requirement or a certain delay requirement, then you have a certain distance from the UE to your service and back, because it's a round trip that you have to go. In most cases, you want to go back and forth, right? And that's why edge is important, so that I can actually bring the compute to the device rather than, just having or in the old case, have a radio network, transport in the core network, and then go to some data center, because that would be too long. But there are other things. For instance, if I bring the compute side to the edge, there's a near edge and a far edge, right? So one of them is closer to the UE, while the other one is closer to the core network. I might also be able to actually, well, first of all, I could utilize the compute that's available. Right? So everyone has compute at home today, which is most of the times not used. Like I'm using this laptop at the moment, it's sleeping overnight. I have a mobile phone over there, I have a tablet over there. These are all compute things. There's computers in the cars, there's computers in, brownware, whiteware in the house. So we can, reutilizing the compute, we can bring the algorithms to where the data is. Don't have to shuffle the data to the network all the time. For analytics, and then most of the data is not even used in the analytics because it can't be used, right? So it's sort of waste in there. If we bring the compute over to the data, we can free the network from that communication. The network is a shared resource, including radio as well as the core network, or the optical or the microwave backhaul. So there's a lot that virtualization can actually help, but it has to come with a different way of designing applications. You need to be cloud native. You need to have some idea about smaller services as compared to big monolithic things that you can actually take and deploy somewhere in small compute, right? So for instance, I have a Raspberry Pi network down here, so I'm using my Raspberry Pi network as my edge. And software I developed, I tried to run on a Raspberry Pi just to have a low compute, low storage system. And we're trying to use those things. And that helps us to get closer to the UE. And that can help with the physics. We can't bend the physics, but we can use it, and we can, we redesign the network in a certain way to actually deal with that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for your great insights. I think that this was a great panel, and we had a very good discussion. Thank you for your time.